a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. North Korea. North Korea, officially the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, is a country in East Asia constituting the northern part of the Korean Peninsula. Pyongyang is the capital and largest city, to the north and northwest. The country is bordered by China and by Russia along the Amnok and Tumen rivers. It is bordered to the south by South Korea, with a heavily fortified Korean Demilitarized Zone separating the two. Nevertheless, North Korea, like its southern counterpart, claims to be the legitimate government of the entire peninsula and adjacent islands. Both North Korea and South Korea became members of the United Nations in 1991. In 1910, Korea was annexed by Imperial Japan. After the Japanese surrender at the end of World War II in 1945, Korea was divided into two zones, with the north occupied by the Soviet Union and the south occupied by the United States. Negotiations on reunification failed, and in 1948, separate governments were formed: the Socialist Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the north and the Capitalist Republic of Korea in the south. An invasion initiated by North Korea led to the Korean War. The Korean Armistice Agreement brought about a ceasefire, but no peace treaty was signed. North Korea officially describes itself as a self-reliant socialist state, and formally holds elections. Various media outlets have called it Stalinist, particularly noting the elaborate cult of personality around Kim Il-sung and his family. The Workers' Party of Korea, led by a member of the ruling family, holds power in the state and leads the Democratic Front for the Reunification of the Fatherland, of which all political officers are required to be members. Juche, an ideology of national self-reliance, was introduced into the constitution in 1972. The means of production are owned by the state through state-run enterprises and collectivized farms. Most services such as healthcare, education, housing and food production are subsidized or state-funded. From 1994 to 1998, North Korea suffered a famine that resulted in the deaths of between 240,000 and 420,000 people, and the population continues to suffer malnutrition. North Korea follows Songun, or military first, policy. It is the country with the highest number of military and paramilitary personnel, with a total of 9,495,000 active, reserve and paramilitary personnel. Its active duty army of 1.21 million is the fourth largest in the world, after China, the United States and India. It possesses nuclear weapons. International organizations have assessed that human rights violations in North Korea are commonplace and are so severe as to have no parallel in the contemporary world. The North Korean government strongly denies most allegations, accusing international organizations of fabricating human rights abuses as part of a smear campaign with the covert intention of regime change. Although they admit that there are human rights issues relating to living conditions which the government is attempting to correct. Etymology. The name Korea derives from the name Goryeo. The name Goryeo itself was first used by the ancient kingdom of Kukoyo in the 5th century as a shortened form of its name. The 10th century kingdom of Goryeo succeeded Kukoyo, and thus inherited its name, which was pronounced by visiting Persian merchants as Korea. The modern spelling of Korea first appeared in the late 17th century in the travel writings of the Dutch East India Company's Hendrik Hamel. After the division of the country into North and South Korea, the two sides used different terms to refer to Korea: Chosun or Joseon in North Korea, and Hanguk in South Korea. In 1948, North Korea adopted Democratic People's Republic of Korea as its new legal name. In the wider world, because the government controlled the northern part of the Korean Peninsula, it is commonly called North Korea to distinguish it from South Korea, which is officially called the Republic of Korea in English. Japanese occupation, 1910-1945. After the First Sino-Japanese War and the Russo-Japanese War, Korea was occupied by Japan from 1910 to 1945. Japan tried to suppress Korean traditions and culture and ran the economy primarily for its own benefit. Korean resistance groups known as Dongnapgun operated along the Sino-Korean border, fighting guerrilla warfare against Japanese forces. Some of them took part in Allied action in China and parts of Southeast Asia. One of the guerrilla leaders was the communist Kim Il-sung, who later became the first leader of North Korea. Division of Korea, 1945-1950. At the end of World War II in 1945, the Korean Peninsula was divided into two zones along the 38th parallel, with the northern half of the peninsula occupied by the Soviet Union and the southern half by the United States. The drawing of the division was assigned to two American officers, diplomat Dean Rusk and Army officer Charles Bonesteel, who chose the 38th parallel because it divided the country approximately in half, but would place the capital Seoul under American control. No experts on Korea were consulted. Nevertheless, the division was immediately accepted by the Soviet Union. The agreement was incorporated into the USS General Order No. 1 for the surrender of Japan. Initial hopes for a unified, independent Korea had evaporated as the politics of the Cold War resulted in the establishment of two separate states with diametrically opposed political, economic, and social systems. Soviet General Terentei Shtaikov recommended the establishment of the Soviet Civil Authority in October 1945, and supported Kim Il-sung as chairman of the Provisional People's Committee for North Korea. Established in February 1946, during the provisional government, Shtaikov's chief accomplishment was a sweeping land reform program that broke North Korea's stratified class system. Landlords and Japanese collaborators fled to the south, where there was no land reform and sporadic unrest. Shtaikov nationalized key industries and led the Soviet delegation to talks on the future of Korea in Moscow and Seoul. In September 1946, South Korean citizens rose up against the Allied military government. In April 1948, an uprising of the Jeju Islanders was violently crushed. The South declared its statehood in May 1948, and 2 months later the ardent anti-communist Syngman Rhee became its ruler. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea was established in the north on the 9th of September 1948. Shtaikov served as the first Soviet ambassador, while Kim Il-sung became premier. Soviet forces withdrew from the north in 1948, and most American forces withdrew from the south in 1949. Ambassador Shtaikov suspected Rhee was planning to invade the north, and was sympathetic to Kim's goal of Korean unification under socialism. The two successfully lobbied Joseph Stalin to support a quick war against the South, which culminated in the outbreak of the Korean War. Korean War, 1950-1953. The military of North Korea invaded the South on the 25th of June 1950, and swiftly overran most of the country. A United Nations force, led by the United States, intervened to defend the South, and rapidly advanced into North Korea. As they neared the border with China, Chinese forces intervened on behalf of North Korea, shifting the balance of the war again. Fighting ended on the 27th of July 1953, with an armistice that approximately restored the original boundaries between North and South Korea. More than 1 million civilians and soldiers were killed in the war. As a result of the war, almost every substantial building in North Korea was destroyed. Some have referred to the conflict as a civil war, with other factors involved. A heavily guarded demilitarized zone still divides the peninsula, and an anti-communist and anti-North Korea sentiment remains in South Korea. Since the war, the United States has maintained a strong military presence in the South, which is depicted by the North Korean government as an imperialist occupation force. It claims that the Korean War was caused by the United States and South Korea. Post-war developments. The relative peace between the South and the North following the armistice was interrupted by border skirmishes, celebrity abductions, and assassination attempts. The North failed in several assassination attempts on South Korean leaders, such as in 1968, 1974 and the Rangoon bombing in 1983. tunnels were found under the DMZ, and tensions flared over the axe murder incident at Panmunjom in 1976. For almost 2 decades after the war, the two states did not seek to negotiate with one another. In 1971, secret, high-level contacts began to be conducted, culminating in the 1972 July 4 North-South Joint Statement that established principles of working toward peaceful reunification. The talks ultimately failed, because in 1973, South Korea declared its preference that the two Koreas should seek separate memberships in international organizations. During the 1956 August faction incident, Kim Il-sung successfully resisted efforts by the Soviet Union and China to depose him in favor of Soviet Koreans or the pro-Chinese Yunnan faction. The last Chinese troops withdrew from the country in October 1958. Which is the consensus as the latest date when North Korea became effectively independent. Some scholars believe that the 1956 August incident demonstrated independence. North Korea remained closely aligned with China and the Soviet Union, and the Sino-Soviet split allowed Kim to play the powers off each other. North Korea sought to become a leader of the non-aligned movement and emphasized the ideology of Juche to distinguish it from both the Soviet Union and China. Recovery from the war was quick. By 1957 industrial production reached 1949 levels. In 1959, relations with Japan had improved somewhat, and North Korea began allowing the repatriation of Japanese citizens in the country. The same year, North Korea revalued the North Korean won, which held greater value than its South Korean counterpart. Until the 1960s, economic growth was higher than in South Korea, and North Korean GDP per capita was equal to that of its southern neighbor as late as 1976. By the 1980s the economy had begun to stagnate. It started its long decline in 1987 and almost completely collapsed after the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, when all Soviet aid was suddenly halted. The North began re-establishing trade relations with China shortly thereafter, but the Chinese could not afford to provide enough food aid to meet demand. Post-Cold War. In 1992, as Kim Il-sung's health began deteriorating, Kim Jong-il slowly began taking over various state tasks. Kim Il-sung died of a heart attack in 1994. In the midst of a standoff with the United States over North Korean nuclear weapon development, Kim Jong-il declared a 3-year period of national mourning before officially announcing his position as the new leader. North Korea promised to halt its development of nuclear weapons under the agreed framework, negotiated with U.S. President Bill Clinton and signed in 1994, building on Nordpolitik. South Korea began to engage with the North as part of its Sunshine Policy. Kim Jong-il instituted a policy called Songan, or Military First. There is much speculation about this policy being used as a strategy to strengthen the military while discouraging coup attempts. Restrictions on travel were tightened, and the state security apparatus was strengthened. Flooding in the mid-1990s exacerbated the economic crisis, severely damaging crops and infrastructure and led to widespread famine which the government proved incapable of curtailing. In 1996, the government accepted UN food aid. Since the outbreak of the famine, the government has reluctantly tolerated illegal black markets while officially maintaining a state socialist economy. Corruption flourished, and disillusionment with the government spread. 21st century. The international environment changed with the election of U.S. President George W. Bush in 2001. His administration rejected South Korea's Sunshine Policy and the agreed framework. The U.S. government treated North Korea as a rogue state, while North Korea redoubled its efforts to acquire nuclear weapons to avoid the fate of Iraq. On the 9th of October 2006, North Korea announced it had conducted its first nuclear weapons test. U.S. President Barack Obama adopted a policy of strategic patience, resisting making deals with North Korea for the sake of diffusing tension. Tensions with South Korea and the United States increased in 2010 with the sinking of the South Korean warship Cheonan and North Korea's shelling of Yeonpyeong Island. On the 17th of December 2011, the supreme leader of North Korea Kim Jong-il died from a heart attack. His youngest son Kim Jong-un was announced as his successor. In the face of international condemnation, North Korea continued to develop its nuclear arsenal, possibly including a hydrogen bomb and a missile capable of reaching the United States. Throughout 2017, following Donald Trump's assumption of the U.S. presidency, tensions between the United States and North Korea increased, and there was heightened rhetoric between the two, with Trump threatening fire and fury and North Korea threatening to launch missiles towards Guam. In 2018, a détente developed. On the 27th of April, a 2018 inter-Korean summit took place between President Moon Jae-in of South Korea and Kim on the South Korean side of the Joint Security Area. It was the first time since the Korean War that a North Korean leader had entered South Korean territory. On the 12th of June 2018, the first meeting between North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, and a U.S. President, Donald Trump, occurred in Singapore. In September, at a summit with Moon in Pyongyang, Kim agreed to dismantle North Korea's nuclear weapons facilities if the United States took reciprocal action. Geography. North Korea occupies the northern portion of the Korean Peninsula, lying between latitudes 37 degrees and 43 degrees north, and longitudes 124 degrees and 131 degrees east. It covers an area of 120,540 square kilometers. North Korea shares land borders with China and Russia to the north, and borders South Korea along the Korean Demilitarized Zone. To its west are the Yellow Sea and Korea Bay, and to its east lies Japan across the Sea of Japan. Early European visitors to Korea remarked that the country resembled a sea in a heavy gale, because of the many successive mountain ranges that crisscross the peninsula. Some 80% of North Korea is composed of mountains and uplands, separated by deep and narrow valleys. All of the Korean Peninsula's mountains with elevations of 2,000 meters or more are located in North Korea. The highest point in North Korea is Pita Mountain, a volcanic mountain with an elevation of 2,744 meters above sea level. Pita is very significant in Korean culture, in which it is considered a sacred place by the Korean people and is thus incorporated in the elaborate folklore around the Kim dynasty. Other prominent ranges are the Hamjeong Range in the extreme northeast, and the Rangram Mountains, which are located in the north-central part of North Korea. Mount Kumgang in the Taebaek Range, which extends into South Korea, is famous for its scenic beauty. The coastal plains are wide in the west and discontinuous in the east. A great majority of the population lives in the plains and lowlands. According to a United Nations Environmental Programme report in 2003, forest covers over 70% of the country, mostly on steep slopes. The longest river is the Amnok River, which flows for 790 kilometers. Climate. North Korea experiences a combination of continental climate and an oceanic climate, but most of the country experiences a humid continental climate within a Köppen climate classification scheme. Winters bring clear weather interspersed with snowstorms as a result of northern and northwestern winds that blow from Siberia. Summer tends to be by far the hottest, most humid, and rainiest time of year. Because of the southern and southeastern monsoon winds that carry moist air from the Pacific Ocean, approximately 60% of all precipitation occurs from June to September. Spring and autumn are transitional seasons between summer and winter. The daily average high and low temperatures for Pyongyang are -3 and in January and 29 and in August. Government and politics. North Korea functions as a highly centralized, one-party state. According to its 2016 constitution, it is a self-described revolutionary and socialist state, guided in its activities by the Juche idea and the Songan idea. In addition to the constitution, North Korea is governed by the 10 principles for the establishment of a monolithic ideological system which establishes standards for governance. and a guide for the behaviors of North Koreans. The Workers' Party of Korea has an estimated 3 million members and dominates every aspect of North Korean politics. It has 2 satellite organizations: the Korean Social Democratic Party and the Condoist Chung-woo Party, which participate in the WPK-led Democratic Front for the Reunification of the Fatherland. Kim Jong-un of the Kim dynasty is the current supreme leader, or Swaeong of North Korea. He heads all major governing structures. He is chairman of the Workers' Party of Korea, chairman of the State Affairs Commission of North Korea, and supreme commander of the Korean People's Army. His grandfather Kim Il-sung, the founder and leader of North Korea until his death in 1994, is the country's eternal president. While his father Kim Jong-il, who succeeded Kim Il-sung as leader, was announced eternal general secretary after his death in 2011. According to the Constitution of North Korea, there are officially 3 main branches of government. The first of these is the State Affairs Commission of North Korea, which acts as the supreme national guidance organ of state sovereignty. Its role is to deliberate and decide the work on defense building of the state, including major policies of the state, and to carry out the directions of the chairman of the commission, Kim Jong-un. Legislative power is held by the unicameral Supreme People's Assembly. Its 687 members are elected every 5 years by universal suffrage. Supreme People's Assembly sessions are convened by the SPA Presidium, whose president represents the state in relations with foreign countries. Deputies formally elect the president, the vice presidents, and members of the Presidium, and take part in the constitutionally appointed activities of the legislature, pass laws, establish domestic and foreign policies, appoint members of the cabinet, review and approve the state economic plan, among others. The SPA itself cannot initiate any legislation independently of party or state organs. It is unknown whether it has ever criticized or amended bills placed before it. And the elections are based around a single list of WPK-approved candidates who stand without opposition. Executive power is vested in the Cabinet of North Korea, which is headed by Premier Pak Pong-ju. The Premier represents the government and functions independently. His authority extends over 2 vice premiers, 30 ministers, 2 cabinet commission chairmen, the cabinet chief secretary, the president of the central bank, the director of the Central Bureau of Statistics, and the president of the Academy of Sciences. A 31st ministry, the Ministry of People's Armed Forces, is under the jurisdiction of the State Affairs Commission. Despite its official title as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, some observers have described North Korea's political system as an absolute monarchy or a hereditary dictatorship. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?